Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let me just give you a rundown of how we're going to do this. And I thank everybody for coming and for participating. We are going to, I'm going to call the first 5 individuals, if you could be ready, and then we'll do one at a time. I'll let you know who is up. You have 3 minutes to speak, and you'll see the timer, I think, is at the podium. And then we also have a time clock here. At the 3-minute mark, the mic goes off. So please just keep it to the 3 minutes. You probably won't be getting any questions or responses from us. We're here to listen to you. And so that's how we'll begin. The first 5 speakers, I will tell you, are going to be in this order: Robin Barr, Joel Lefebvre, Scott, it looks like Rian, Dorothy Siegel, and Winnie Chin. So if I could have you folks ready, and perhaps I could call Robin. I'm sorry?
There has been a question about the dates.
Sorry. Why don't you go ahead and, yeah,
I can't find it.
the dates of,
There has been a question apparently about the dates for the future hearings.
I have that.
Did you announce the website?
Yeah, the website, just so you know, is now open. It's campaignfinancereform.newyork.gov.
.ny.gov.
I'm sorry.
.gov.
.gov. And the dates, the following dates are, the next one is September 18th at 10 a.m. At the Rockefeller Institute of Government, 411 State Street in Albany, New York. Then we have on Tuesday, October the 22nd, also it looks like at 10 a.m. at the Suffolk County Legislature, William J. Lindsay County Complex, William H. Rogers Building, 725 Veterans Memorial Highway in Smithtown, New York. The 4th hearing is going to be on Tuesday, October the 29th, beginning at 11 a.m. at the Birchfield Penny Arts Center, 1300 Elmwood Avenue in Buffalo, New York. So those are the next 3 hearings coming up. And I believe the question was, I think we're going to have the testimony posted online at some point. Give us a little time to get that on, but we'll get that testimony from this morning posted online. So if I can have Robin Barr. Yeah, what we had this morning, what was submitted to us this morning, will be put online. Okay? Hi.
Hello, everybody. My name is Robin Barr. I'm here to speak for the League of Women Voters of the City of New York and reform legislation. Thank you. I add my thanks to all of you for this opportunity to give testimony. We see these hearings on public policy as democracy in action, grassroots democracy. That is what the League is all about, so we are happy to be here and part of your outreach. As you may know, the League is a nonpartisan political organization which was born in the suffrage movement and helped lead the fight for the women's right to vote. Since then, the League has fought for the rights of all Americans to vote and for the protection and preservation of the democratic process. The heart of our fight to protect the democracy has been our fight for the reform of campaign finance laws. This has been a long, tough fight, one we have waged for decades. It was in 1974 that the League spoke out for comprehensive reform with this declaration: the methods of financing political campaigns should ensure the public's right to know, combat corruption, enable citizens to compete more equitably for public office, and allow citizen maximum participation in the electoral process. This remains our position today, 45 years later. We are fighting for the following reforms, which we think embody these principles: a voluntary public financing program for candidates that matches small donations with public funds and, as has been said, opens up the opportunity for all citizens to compete for public office; an independent oversight and enforcement body with the responsibility for disclosure of donors and for the administration of campaign finance law. Obviously, that's our protection against corruption and in the integrity of the law, and reduction of the state's high campaign contribution limits to parties and all candidates, not just those participating in the public financing system, to reduce the power of special interests to buy votes. and, most importantly, maximize the opportunity for citizen participation in government upon which democracy rests. Our fight is not a single-issue fight. It's not enough to enact just a reduction of campaign contributions or a program of public financing or an enforcement entity. The fight is for comprehensive reform, the enactment of all these reforms, which together has the potential to transform the culture in Albany from a pay-to-play to democratic governance. There is reason to hope that this can be accomplished. Finally, the governor has called for reform, the Fair Elections Commission has called for reform, and you have responded to the call for reform. So there may continue to be resistance from entrenched interests. But for all of us here, all, including you and for all of us, and for all New Yorkers who truly believe in the strength and health and future of our democracy, this is the fight we must fight and win. So we ask you to fight with us and make reform happen in New York
Thank
State
you.
government.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Joe Lefebvre? And I'll just remind everybody, when the yellow light goes on, you've got 30 seconds left, and let's please keep it to the 3 minutes. We have a lot of people lined up. Thank you. Okay, Joe.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Could you
My name is Joel Lefebvre.
speak into the mic, please, just so we can make sure we can hear you?
Don't.
Oh, no, don't?
Good afternoon. My name is Joel Lefebvre. I'm a registered voter in Westchester County and a member of the State Committee of the Working Families Party from the 16th Congressional District. I want to briefly address the issue of fusion voting. I have also submitted a more detailed version, a written version of this testimony. First, multiple party nominations for the same office, or fusion, is a constitutionally protected voting right in New York State. Politicians have attempted to roll back the right to fusion 3 times in the last 100 years, and each time the State Court of Appeals has reversed them. In 1910, in the Callahan case, the appeals court justices wrote, quote, "Forbidding a committee of any party authorized to make nominations or fill vacancies to nominate a candidate of another party for the same office are plainly invalid and unconstitutional. If the legislature does grant to any convention, committee, or body the right to make nominations, it cannot limit the right of such convention, committee, or body to nominate as its candidate any person who is qualified for the office. The electors have the right to vote for whom they please. This right cannot be denied to them by legislation. Fusion has been a part of New York elections since before the Civil War. No elected official, and not a commission, has the power to tamper with constitutionally protected right of fusion voting. Second, should the commission decide to make acceptance of multiple party nominations a condition that disqualifies a candidate from participation in the campaign finance program, that would violate well-settled law prohibiting arbitrary exclusions from candidacy for office. In deciding Callahan, Chief Judge Cullen wrote, quote, "It is true that the legislature may prescribe qualifications for office where there is no constitutional provision on the subject, but it has been settled law from the earliest period in the history of our state that it cannot enact arbitrary exclusions from office. If it cannot enact arbitrary exclusions from office, equally, it cannot enact arbitrary exclusions from candidacy for office. What exclusion could be more arbitrary than one party or organization should not be permitted to nominate the candidate of another?" End quote. Crippling a candidacy by starving it of matching funds is a serious impediment of the election franchise. Effectively eliminating fusion voting by financial starvation is a severe infringement on my constitutionally protected right to freely choose to vote for whom and for advocate for candidates for office in this state on the ballot line of the political party that reflect my trade union values. Trade unionists and allies, community allies, created the Working Families Party as a vehicle to further our values. Severe infringement on the right to express those values in political process and discourse is anti-democratic.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We want you to succeed.
Thank you. Thank you, Joel. Scott Reen?
Good afternoon.
Good
My
afternoon.
name is Scott Ring. I am the chairman of the Putnam County Democratic Committee, only 45 miles away from the Bronx, where I was born, yet a world away. We are technically part of the rural Democratic Caucus because our population is so small. We are outnumbered as Democrats in Putnam County by only 3,000 votes, which may not sound like a lot here, but it decidedly is the decision factor in almost every election. There's about 5 people who control most elections in Putnam County, and there's the chair of the Conservative Party and the chair of the Republican Party, and I would hope, at least in the future, the chair of the Democratic Party. I ask you to reconsider and to have a determination to end fusion voting. In our county, it causes us to lose. In our county, it takes away people's choice, in my opinion. What you have is you have people bargaining to get on various lines. The independence line is strong in Putnam and almost always goes to the Republican candidate. The Republican candidate is oftentimes, if not always, chosen first, and then the other parties fall in behind them. We have a lot of strong-willed people in Putnam, and they find themselves to be independent, and they think that they are going to vote for the independent candidate, and they vote on the independence line. So much so that we have people who are proudly registered independents, not realizing that they've registered under a party that is far from independent. We lose often. We have lost almost every single presidential election since the county government was formed in the 60s. In this past election, countywide, we had no victories. Senator Gillibrand lost in our county. We did have some victories shared with Westchester, which is more Democrat-friendly. But we don't get the same advantages that others do. The Working Family Party has passionate voters in our party, but they don't have a lot of voters. They have passionate people who work hard. They worked hard for State Senator Harcum, and they helped him win, but the numbers don't match up. The conservative voter registration outnumbers our working families, I think, close to 5 to 1. It is something that is nearly insurmountable, and so what Democrats end up doing is we try to get in with the conservative party to say, hey, we are fiscal conservatives. There's no more fiscal conservatism in the Republican Party where we live and all local things. But yet people go to the ballot box and they say, well, I'm conservative. This person's on the conservative line. Yet that person may have raised taxes every year for the last 15 years. And you don't end up having people having the same choice that they think they have. And so for those reasons, we are against fusion voting in Putnam County. And as
Thank
the
you.
chair of the Putnam County Democratic.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Dorothy Siegel?
Hi. My name is Dorothy Siegel. I'm a citizen and a voter who's lived in Brooklyn for, I added it up, almost half a century. I recently retired from New York University, where I worked with the New York City Department of Ed to create inclusion programs for children with autism. Thank you for this opportunity to testify before you today. I have only one point to make, to wit, the purpose of this commission is not to do the bidding of the Democratic Party. It is to represent the people of this state in reducing the corrupting effect of money in politics and to devise a fair and effective system of public financing of elections. Multiple press reports imply that this commission is a tool of the state Democratic Party. What does the Democratic Party want this commission to do? At its recent convention, the Democratic Party and its chair, Jay Jacobs, called for an end to fusion voting. In an interview afterwards, Party Chair Jacobs said, "We hope there would be action based on this resolution." Is this commission the instrument for the action Chair Jacobs is hoping for? Commissioner Jacobs has repeatedly and publicly proclaimed his determination to end fusion voting. He did so even before hearing any testimony, which is disheartening to people like me who actually believe in good government. So my question to you is this: is this commission simply a rubber stamp that will do the bidding of the Democratic Party? Mr. Jacobs, why do you think it's okay to overturn a long-established right of the people of this state? I understand that you don't like minor parties, but hey, it's a democracy. Everybody gets to play, no? The highest court in New York State has ruled so. Indeed, in my own Brooklyn district, The WFP routinely receives 20 to 25% of the total vote, exceeding by far the combined tallies of all other parties outside the Democratic Party. That makes WFP the second political party in my neighborhood. Clearly, voters in my hood, in this part of Brooklyn, don't think that the opportunity to vote on the WFP line is something they want to have taken away from them. Therefore, with due respect and an appeal to fair play, I ask you, Mr. Jacobs, to recuse yourself from any and all discussion of votes that the Commission holds on fusion. You've disqualified yourself by your public statements and actions. Please restrict yourself to participating only in the discussions and votes on the campaign finance aspects of the Commission's work. To the other 8 commissioners, 7, I pose this question. Do you want to allow yourselves to be used to settle a political score? I don't think so. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy. Winnie Chin?
Hello, my name is Wendy Chin, and I am with the New York Immigration Coalition, an umbrella policy and advocacy organization that works statewide with over 200 immigrant-serving member organizations. Thank you for today's opportunity to testify. New York has seen many barriers to the ballot box lifted with the passage of an impressive voting reforms package earlier this year. But to strengthen our democracy, we need to go even further. We have changed how we vote, but now we have to change how we give. I stand before you all today to advocate for a voluntary, opt-in, small donor public financing system for candidates in New York State. For most candidates, their priorities have always been 1, attracting large donors, and 2, engaging likely voters. And those left out of the conversation are far too often the most underserved and underengaged communities. Public financing of elections with a small dollar match incentivizes candidates to engage with communities that have historically been underengaged or non-engaged at all. It gives those communities, with their campaign donations, a more powerful voice in the process and a greater say in who is representing them in government. That increased engagement creates opportunities to talk with elected officials and candidates about the issues that matter and influence policy, budgets, decisions, and outcomes. And this is the democracy we are advocating for today. When big money and most New Yorkers have divergent interests, and when the prioritization of our politicians are almost always misaligned with their big, wealthy donors, it is the hundreds and thousands of immigrant families and communities of color that is often overlooked in this decision-making process. When the real estate industry outspends small donors 7-1, we see policies that decrease both the stock and the affordability of housing in our state. When the rich outspend the poor, we see resources pouring into private schools while our public schools continue to struggle with funding shortages. This misaligned prioritization harms the overall efficacy of our democracy. The current system favors New York's wealthiest, who are often overwhelmingly white. Not only is there a lack of fair representation demographically, but also geographically. Statewide, 2/3 of those who contributed $10,000 or more resided in just 3 counties: New York, Nassau, and Westchester. Candidates know this, and they go where the money is, soliciting contributions from neighborhoods that they're not even seeking to represent. And this means they are responsive to people who do not live in their district, people who have different needs and wants from a candidate's potential constituency. And the dollars of a few have dictated the livelihoods of many, and now is the time to change that. In addition to a more diverse pool of campaign contributors, a small dollar matching system also allows for a more diverse group of candidates who may not have deep pockets. May not have deep pockets, and candidates who do not come from wealthy communities. So I ask you all today to please make sure that to not keep our politics in a play-to-play game, and to make the process for real New Yorkers to affect decisions that impact their everyday. Thank you.
Thank you, Winnie. Can I ask Senator Robert Jackson is here. Senator Jackson.
Bobby Carroll, just
Thank you. I ran up because I don't want to keep you waiting.
Thank
Good
you.
afternoon, Commissioners. So, my name is Robert Jackson, and I'm a New York State Senator representing the 31st Senatorial District in Manhattan. And I'm here today because this is the best chance in years to adopt a strong system of public financing, and I urge you, this commission, to put in place the public financing plan for New York State, similar to what was adopted, implemented in New York City years ago. And don't miss this opportunity by getting involved in political struggles and fights on sides and different issues like fusion voting. And I am the product of the New York City public finance system. Growing up in New York City, my family was very poor. When I say very poor, I mean very, very, very poor. But I worked hard in school, and I was a state investigator for about 5 years investigating fraud, and then I went to go work for a statewide union, the New York State Public Employees Federation. And I continue today as an education advocate to make sure all of our children get the best education we can. But I was able to run for the city council and win with the help of the campaign finance, which means so many small contributions, and it meant so much more to me. In order to successfully amplify the voices of everyday New Yorkers in the political process, we need a strong public financing program at the state level, which should include 6-to-1 matching of small donations for both primary and general elections, lower contribution limits, and an independent, fully funded enforcement unit. By matching small donations with public funding, we can amplify the voices of everyday New Yorkers, including women, of people of color, of working and middle classes, and any and all underrepresented New Yorkers in the political process. We can give everyday people the means to run for office and represent their communities while relying on small donations and not instead of relying on large checks. And with the small donor matching, candidates can focus on raising small donations from their constituents instead of seeking large checks from special interests and out-of-district donors. As the New York Times opined yesterday, quote, "The benefit of public financing are clear. Better government, led by politicians who are more independent and more responsive to communities that they are meant to serve." That's what they said. And at the same time, I strongly urge you not to jeopardize this important good by also including unrelated issues such as fusion voting. Not only is fusion a constitutionally protected voting right in New York, fusion ensures that New Yorkers have the right to vote for the party of their choice and the candidate of their choice. Fusion is good for democracy, and our choices should not be diminished.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you. Ellen Martin?
And Mr. Chair, may I have 30 seconds more?
I wish I could, but I've been told that I
Thank
got
you.
to keep it 3 minutes.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
I did hand in my testimony. I
Thank
hope
you.
you have it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Ellen Martin? Three minutes.
You're tough.
Yeah, gotta be.
Good afternoon. My name is Ellen Martin. I live at 10 West 66th Street in Manhattan. I'm here today because for me, curbing the influence of big money in politics is the most important issue facing our state government. Implementing a robust public campaign financing system that supports candidates who rely on small donors is the way to accomplish that and the way to restore integrity in our government. New York not only has a reputation for being a state in which you need to pay to play, it has well earned that reputation, unfortunately. In the last decade, there have been 19 convictions for public corruption in our state government. Within just a little bit over a year ago, as you will probably well know, 3 of the highest officials in our state were sent to jail for taking bribes to do political favors. And the numbers tell a story. For the 2018 state election, the top 100 donors gave more to candidates than all 137,000 small donors combined. There's no doubt that those contributing huge dollars are doing so to try to buy influence in Albany, influence over issues that are equally important to the little guy in New York, but for the big donors, these payments are just another cost of doing business. I do believe that almost all of our public officials in New York are honest people trying to do the honorable things, but the temptations and the pressures provided by big money are simply too big for some of them to withstand the pressure. And that's because of how much money they need to raise, everyone needs to raise, in order to launch and win their campaigns. A strong public finance campaign system would give our elected officials the freedom to withstand those pressures, and that would be a huge accomplishment for integrity of our government. A strong public finance system would do many other good things as well. They give New Yorkers an incentive to become involved in political process, have their candidates listen to them. So please create a match that's significant, 6-to-1. Create an independent enforcement system and lower the maximum contribution that a donor may give. I want to trust my state government, and I know that that's what most everyday New Yorkers want to do too. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. State Senator Brad Hoylman is here.
Thank you. Thank you, members of the commission. I'm State Senator Brad Hoylman. First, thank you for your service for this important commission. You know, when we created this commission and the 2019-20 state budget, we stated that your recommendations should be in furtherance of the following goals, to remind you: incentivizing candidates to solicit small contributions, reducing the pressure on candidates to spend inordinate amounts of time raising large contributions for their campaigns, and encouraging qualified candidates to run for office. To achieve all of these goals, I urge the members to adopt a system of state public financing program that includes the following components. First, provide at least a 6-to-1 match on small donations to create a strong incentive for candidates to prioritize contributions from small donors. We know that our current system of campaign finance in the state of New York is broken. That's why legislators like me supported the creation of your commission. According to the Brennan Center for Justice, in 2018, and I know you heard this earlier, a group of 100 donors that was mostly white, male, and wealthy gave more money to statewide candidates than all 137,000 small donors combined. That is absurd, and that needs to be changed. You have the power to change it. This is as unacceptable for the state as large and diverse as New York. The good news is that you create this phenomenal opportunity to create a system of public financing for New York State that's truly a model for the nation, but we have to do it right. That's why we also need to set lower contributions limits for all candidates, including those who do not participate in a public campaign financing program. It's crazy to me that as a donor to the campaign for state senate, you can give more to a state senator than you can to the President of the United States. You also need to establish a truly independent campaign finance agency separate from the State Board of Elections, with the Candidate Services and Oversight Unit that will both guard against fraud as well as provide support services for candidates. Now, finally, on the issue of fusion voting. I'm a proud member of the Working Families Party and was elected on both the Democratic and Working Party's lines. And I have to say, I'm a better public official because I was elected on both lines. I see in my district the members of the WFP and the general public who support me as a Working Party's candidate. And that has made representatives like me more attuned to issues of interest, progressive issues in the case of the Working Party's family, such as minimum wage and paid family leave. I strongly urge the Commission to spend its time on public financing. Please do not get distracted by the issue of fusion voting. The real issue is fixing our campaign finance system with a system of public financing of elections, not fusion voting. Thank you very much,
Thanks,
Mr.
Senator.
Chair.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate the opportunity to speak to you
Appreciate
today.
it.
Thank you.
Jawanza Williams? Jawanza Williams? I'm sorry, it's, well, it's, no. It's not spelled that way at all, all right?
Sorry, Giovanni.
That's Jamani, okay. No, it's.
Thank
you. Thank you so much for
No,
your
no,
service.
It may
and
be
for-
somebody different, it's Vocal New York. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Jawanza Williams from Vocal New York, I apologize. I'm sorry.
here?
She's outside? Well, you know what? Jamani, you're there?
Yeah, here.
Let's go. You got it. But I don't want you to think I got the name wrong, okay? All right. I get a lot wrong, but not the name.
All right, thank you so much for your service and for being on this commission. As was mentioned, my name is Jamani Williams, Public Advocate for the City of New York, and I would like to,
All right, we'll get her next. We'll get her next. Go ahead. I'm
All right.
sorry. Go.
give my time back. Under our current system, big donors, the same privileged demographic, have an outsized voice in our system and can almost unilaterally, at times, determine the outcome of an election and pressure elected officials to prioritize their needs over those of everyday New Yorkers. In the 2018 election, the top 100 donors in New York gave more to candidates than all small donors combined, disproportionately harming candidates of more color and women. If elections are intended to ensure the candidates that best represent a constituency can win, we need to ensure those candidates are not dissuaded from running because of limited financial resources. As such, we must ensure a public financing system. We must implement at least a 6-to-1 match on small donations for both primary and general elections. We must lower our contribution limits. We must create an independent enforcement unit separate from the Board of Elections. Having experience with the Campaign Finance Board, there are some problems there. So we should take the best of what's existing and really fix the other parts of it. I would not have been elected to the City Council, a community organizer like me, without the Campaign Finance Board. I know that there are some in the party that might be happy about that, but I think we did serve the City of New York and the people who live in New York very well because of that robust public funding system. I honestly believe this wave of progressivism started in 2009 when the Working Families Party backed a bunch of radical folks. At least then, it's kind of in vogue now to be radical, but back then there weren't people who were agreeing with us, got us elected and really pushed in the right direction. We must have a finance system like that in the state of New York. I ran for lieutenant governor, raised $370,000. My opponent raised $2.9. Combined with the party and the governor, probably spent another 10. I got 47% of the vote. If I had a campaign finance system, I'd probably be lieutenant governor. Wherever we had our message, people listened and it worked. I would also recommend that the commission preserve fusion voting, which has no policy connection at all to public financing. This commission was put together to deal with public financing, not fusion voting, which is a constitutionally recognized right that ensures New Yorkers can support a third party. As such, there is no reason to mix conversations about public financing with fusion voting. I really think it's an atrocious overreach to combine these two issues. And if I'm honest, this is clear that this is Governor Cuomo following through with his threat to get rid of the Working Families Party. And I was sincerely appreciate your work, Mr. Jacobs, the party chair. It was embarrassing to see that be the first thing that this commission voted on. I really hope that you reconsider and decouple these conversations because they have nothing to do with it. We are all watching right now in real time while a bully follows through with a threat, with something that has nothing to do with the initial reason this commission was put together. We have pushed forward a lot of progressive issues and plans that people are now taking credit for. The governor, one of them. It would not have been done without the people we got elected, which all started with public finance. So I implore you, people are watching what's happening now. Don't let the governor get rid of the Working Families Party. They backed me for the 10 years when the party went and when counties went. And there are so many like me who have made this city better by being elected officials.
Thank you, thank you. Now can I ask for Jawanza Williams? Okay,
No, you're fine. Thank you.
okay.
So thank you, Commission, for holding this event. It's very important for our state. So first I want to say that My name is Jawanza James Williams, and I am the Director of Organizing at Vocal New York, which is a statewide organization, and I am representing thousands of New Yorkers infected by HIV/AIDS, mass incarceration, homelessness, and the drug war. I am also a leader in the movement for campaign finance reform in New York State because it has been demonstrated year after year that we cannot depend on elected officials in Albany to do the work to address the crises my organization was founded to address over 20 years ago because of the overwhelming influence of industry compromising their leadership and devastating vulnerable communities. So we're counting on our elected leaders and the commission that they appointed, you all, to deliver a strong public financing program by the end of the year, and that means a 6-to-1 small donor match in both primary and general elections across the state. We want to lower contribution limits and an independent enforcement unit. The power that campaign contributions from industry has in Albany is not a myth, it is not an exaggeration, it is a shocking reality, and it is absolutely antithetical to any democratic experiment. Elected officials across political lines are often beholden to corporate contributions to acquire and maintain power. This has a muting effect that silences the interests and experiences of low-income, working, and middle-income people from both cities and rural areas of our state, from Brooklyn to Plattsburgh. So we, as a people, ought to be always creating systems of accountability and expanding the democratic process so that all of those subject to the state are allowed the space and ability to articulate their interests. Fusion voting is critical to New York, and the Working Families Party has been integral to the advances of working people in New York State. I call on you, this commission, to leave fusion untouched. We are expanding our democracy, not trading at the expense of New Yorkers. Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much. Can I have Assemblyman Robert Carroll? Assemblyman Robert Carroll.
Good afternoon. As a member of the New York State Assembly, I urge this commission to make no formal recommendations as contemplated in the enacting framework that created the Campaign Finance and Election Commission. I urge you to make no formal recommendations, not because I do not support campaign finance, but because I do. I believe that empowering the electorate in the task of how we fund elections is so important that this task must be done by the legislature and not 9 unelected commissioners. This does not mean that you do not have a role to play in strengthening our democracy. I think by tempering your possible authority and using these next few months to research, question, and contemplate how best to create a public financing system in our democracy will be a great service. You can create a compendium of ideas, of best practices, of how we best create a small dollar matching program or a program of democracy vouchers. You can outline what would be the appropriate contribution thresholds for obtaining matching dollars and which dollars are in fact matched and how that system would work in a state as big and diverse as New York. Then finally, you can charge the legislature to take up this call. I believe that the scope set forth in the enacting legislation that created this commission is in violation of Article 3 of the state constitution, which clearly states that the lawmaking authority of the state is solely vested in the Assembly and Senate. You have not been charged with simply setting a toll or the salary of the members of the legislature, but to create a public financing system out of whole cloth, which has the power to change the foundations of many of our election laws. You have been given the possible power to create how we fund our democracy and then thus to shape what our democracy looks like. This power wielded incorrectly will have detrimental effects. Because the Commission's power is so broadly defined, you will be tempted to change a wide range of our election laws, including the practice of fusion voting and other ballot access laws. No matter what you do, or power you feel you have, I urge you to resist changing or even contemplating anything broader than the narrow task of creating a system of publicly financed elections. To that end, I highlight the multiple instances where fusion is mentioned in the Court of Appeals and enshrined in our state constitution, and again, mention Article 3 of the state constitution that says the legislature is the sole lawmaking body of this state. I also remind you history that the campaign finance laws created in New York City were created first by the 1988 Campaign Finance Act that was passed by the City Council, and then the Campaign Finance Board was created by the Charter Review Commission, and all of that was ratified by the public through a public vote. This will not be public. Please do not do this. Finally, the 3-week window that the legislature has to act is pure window dressing. It does not allow for proper review by the legislature. Come up with ideas, force us to take up these topics, but do not create formal recommendations. This is not democracy. Be stewards of democracy. Be stewards of New York State. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Can I ask for New York City Comptroller Scott Stringer?
Thank you, Chairman Jacobs, and thank you, Commission, for giving me this opportunity to come before you today. I'm Scott Stringer, New York City Comptroller, and I'm here to say that public financing of campaigns is good for our democracy and should be adopted by New York State. Elections that are free, fair, and competitive remain a cornerstone of our democracy, and I think it is incumbent upon all of us to strengthen our electoral system whenever possible. We've all seen the corrupting influence of big money in this age of Citizens United and how the unlimited resources of a few can overwhelm the voices of the many. I'm glad that this commission has chosen to hold its first hearing right here in New York City, because the truth is that our campaign finance system already offers commission members a model with a proud history of success. For voters, our current 8-to-1 match means being able to participate in our democracy in a meaningful way, especially if you are a working person with limited means. As for candidates, public financing means a level playing field, an opportunity to compete even against privately financed candidates with unlimited resources. I know this from experience. In 2013, when I first ran for controller, as Henry Berger knows all too well, my opponent was a former governor who at the last minute decided to run for city controller. He chose to use his own money to fund his campaign and did not hold back, spending $12 million in just 9 weeks. Had I not been enrolled in our public financing system, there is no question that I would have lacked the resources to be competitive. But thanks to the city's system of matching funds, we were able to get our message out and give voters a real choice. And that's what public financing is really all about, giving candidates from all walks of life a chance to run a competitive race, including women and people of color who for too long have been locked out of the big money club. It's about fairness and equity and making sure that billionaires and big corporations are not allowed to drown out the voices of regular people who now more than ever are yearning to participate. It's time for the state to follow New York City lead and adopt its own system of matching funds and give everyday voters more choice. But let me be very clear. Public finance campaigns and fusion voting have nothing to do with each other and do not belong in the same conversation. The Commission needs to examine how to expand publicly financed campaigns because that is a problem in need of a solution. But the proper time and place for debating fusion voting is not before this Commission, it's in the state legislature. Our state courts have been very clear. Fusion voting is a constitutionally protected right, which means that no unelected board should have a say over its fate, and I say that respectfully. And look, I'm a long-time Democrat, long-life Democrat. I believe in the Democratic Party. But the truth is that not everyone fits neatly into a two-party system that has defined our nation for decades. That's why it's important to maintain our current system of fusion voting, to give voters more ways to express their values, to draw more people in, and energize the electorate. What we cannot do is miss the opportunity to bring reform. The state's current campaign finance system belongs in another era. It's become a national poster child for what not to do. So I know the time is short. I have been cut off.
We're still listening. We're still listening.
I respect that, but for the one person who wants me to continue, let me just say that we need to do this now. We will then become the model for the nation, and we will truly have.
Okay, thank you. I got to hold everybody to 3 minutes, and I
No, and I'm
apologize
sorry,
to the elected officials. Understand that, we have everybody here wanting to speak, and no one person is going to get more privilege than the other. And I'm sorry to have to cut folks off, but sometimes I just have to do that. And I do thank you for your testimony. Natalian Adegeson, I'm sorry if I got that all messed up.
I am married in Nigerian. Adesegun.
Okay. Could you please say your name?
Yes, I am Nathan Flowers Adeshegan.
Okay.
This is a call for democracy. I'm a leader with Vocal New York, Voices of Community Activists and Leaders, a grassroots organization committed to ending homelessness. I want to thank the Commission for convening this public hearing to hear from we the people, the communities, for the need for campaign finance reform. And I argue that we need a radical transformation of our system in New York State if we are committed to fully equitable democratic processes. You might recognize me. I was in the news last year when I confronted the mayor at the gym, telling him he had to do something about homeless. I'm still homeless. I still live in a shelter, having been evicted from my apartment of 34 years when my rent went from $475 to $1,319.16, my preferential rent, which we have now changed in the legislature. And I'm here because I understand the connection of the housing crisis to the reality that real estate and development industries have a troubling grasp on those elevated to power in Albany. And consequently, we do not have enough action from the state-created and exacerbate the homeless crisis in New York City and across this state. We're counting on our elected officials, our elected leaders, and the commission they appointed to deliver a strong public financing program by the end of the year. That means the 6-to-1 match on small donations for both primary and general elections, lower contribution limits, and independent enforcement unit that will make sure there is a level playing field. I was at the March on Washington in 1963 with Martin Luther King Jr. We were fighting for jobs, justice, and fair housing. When did the Voting Rights Act come into being? 1965. We are still fighting for justice, and it's up to we the people, of the people, and by the people to provide it. I want to also point out that communities in New York turned New York State into a true blue state and got rid of the IDC. And we empowered our voters because we are successful, because we know that we have to speak and you have to listen. We voted for you, the people who gave you the commission. We want to have campaign finance reform, which is absolutely necessary. It shouldn't be only the rich who can run and rule. We want a healthy democracy, one for all and all for one. Finally, thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I have Assemblywoman Linda Rosenthal? I got him right here. Yep. I'll get him.
Okay, I'm going to speed read. Hello, Commissioners. I'm Assemblymember Linda B. Rosenthal. I represent the Upper West Side, parts of Hell's Kitchen, and I've been a sponsor of fair elections legislation to create a voluntary system for public financing of state elections since I was first elected to office in 2006. Now, it's not my first choice to delegate my legislative authority to an unelected commission, and that is why I'm here today to express my strong and continuing support for public financing. In addition, like many of my colleagues, I'm a strong and firm supporter of fusion voting and urge the Commission to leave fusion voting alone. I'm an incumbent in public office who's dedicated my life to public service, and I'm honored by the trust that my constituents place in me. It is my responsibility as their elected rep to do all I can to amplify their voices in Albany, to ensure that it is their voices that rise above the din of deep-pocketed corporate interests who have for too long controlled our politics and stood in the way of a progressive vision for New York. For years, millions of dollars in campaign contributions greased the wheels in Albany in favor of a select few and prevented us from passing, for example, meaningful tenant protection and affordable housing laws, in addition to a raft of other critically important pieces of progressive legislation. Passing the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act of 2019, which took an army of voters rising up in frustration without public financing, is a prime example of the kind of transformational change we will be able to achieve with public financing of elections. I urge the Commission to approve a system for all statewide primary and general election campaigns that encourages donations from small individual donors by providing at least a 6-to-1 match. This system should also ensure that qualifications set encourage competition among serious, viable candidates and also provide incentives to candidates to fundraise from small donors by establishing lower contribution limits for all candidates. Finally, the Commission should establish an agency to provide guidance and support to candidates and prevent against fraud. It won't just provide for greater public control of politics, it will encourage people from diverse backgrounds, currently entirely unrepresented in government, to help them win to campaigns. Competition is healthy for democracy. We all know the best way to champion an idea is to see it stand up to challenge. The current system is designed in a way that blocks fresh ideas and new faces, and implementing a robust system will help change that. We also agreed, we did not intend for the Commission to dismantle fusion voting, which allows candidates to run on multiple lines. It helps non-major parties to be represented, and I urge fusion voting to be off the table. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Appreciate it. Can I ask for Matthew Kane? Thank you. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm Matthew Kane. I'm a member of the Working Families Party State Committee from the 7th Congressional District. Thank you for hosting this forum to hear from everyday New Yorkers about the changes we want to see in our voting system. Across the country, our democracy is under threat, and it is encouraging to see New York take the right steps to fix these issues and put the power back into the hands of people of our state. First, it's important to diminish the power of political donors who can outspend public opinion. Therefore, I support a strong public financing system that includes at least a 6-to-1 match on small donations for both primary and general elections, lower contribution limits, and an independent enforcement unit, as many people have said today. While this by itself won't undo the damage caused by the Supreme Court's decision in Citizens United, it will make it easier for folks like me to have our voices heard. Second, the Commission must not alter or diminish fusion voting in any way. Fusion voting brings greater choice and more options to New York voters, empowering us to say not just who we support, but how we'd like to see them govern. Too many of our elections are seen as just a selection between the lesser of two evils, but fusion enables voters to feel good about their choice. When I vote for a candidate on the Working Families Party line, I'm sending a message not just that I think they're marginally better than the opponent, I'm saying that I want them to live their values and govern boldly. And I can do this without spoiling the election by giving my votes to a candidate who could never win. The same is true for folks who vote on the Conservative Party line, and while I disagree with those people's politics, I would not encourage anyone to take away their ability to express their opinions. Public financing systems exist in concert with fusion voting in both New York City and Connecticut and have caused no issues. Any argument that fusion voting complicates public financing is disingenuous. Funding is not based on party affiliation or ballot line, but on small dollar donations. The two systems exist independently and both strengthen democracy by allowing more people's voices to be heard. Tying them together risks politicizing the Commission and compromising the Commission's recommendations on public financing. This commission was created because New Yorkers are crying out for elected officials to fix our democracy by making it harder for one person to use their power and money to change the outcome of our elections. There is no similar outcry against fusion voting, and this push to end the practice is simply the result of one person using his power and influence to force changes that benefit him alone. Fusion is good for democracy, and the goal of this commission is to strengthen and expand our democracy by establishing a public financing system to reduce the power of big money in politics and to strengthen the role of grassroots small dollar donors. Undermining or ending New York's fusion voting system would be a huge mistake and a huge step in the opposite direction that would weaken our democracy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Perfect timing. Excellent. Can I ask John Kamen on behalf of County Executive Steve Bellone, I think the Deputy County Executive from Suffolk County.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Jacobs and to the committee. On behalf of County Executive Steve Bellone from Suffolk County, who can't be here, he's in Washington today and tomorrow for the 9/11 commemoration. I would just like to speak very briefly. We are going to submit his comments in writing, but we would like to share that from Suffolk County's perspective, we oppose fusion voting. We believe it does not add more opportunity for voters. In fact, it's just the opposite. What it does is give individual leaders greater authority and control over the electoral process, resulting in what we've experienced as a distortion of the people's will. And so we would prefer to have individual parties present their own candidates, present their ideas. We certainly support some of them, we oppose others. Everyone should have access to the ballot, and we certainly agree that greater access is important. But in terms of allowing individual parties to divvy up the ballot in ways that remove options for people, we believe undermines the electoral process, and therefore we oppose fusion voting and would like to make that as part of the record. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. Christopher Torres.
Hi, my name is Christopher Torres, and I'm here to testify in favor of protecting fusion voting and expanding the public financing of elections to the entirety of the state of New York. Over the last 13 years, I've carved out a career for myself in politics, government, and advocacy, whether it be organizing around a candidate or lobbying along friends to pass dream legislation. I'm driven to build grassroots power in the communities that have been most historically underserved. Over those 13 years in New York City, there have been two cornerstones that have been unwavering and guiding. One is the idea that not everyone fits neatly in the Democratic or Republican Party box. Citizens who support a third party still deserve the right to participate in politics in a meaningful and effective way. Fusion is that. Under the state's fusion voting system, voters can vote for a candidate who can actually win, but also vote for a candidate on a party line whose values they want to support. I believe this to be essential to our democracy in New York State. The other is that small donor matching funds remains the most powerful solution to countering large donations and the unlimited secret money flowing into our elections after Citizens United. Unsurprisingly, wealthy white donor pools, Unsurprisingly, candidates of color and women have less access to wealthy white donor pools. If we want our government to represent all of society, then we need a system that encourages people from all walks of life to consider serving in public office. I grew up in Southern California, where the population is heavily Mexican and Latino. Our representation did not look like us, and they weren't us. What resulted was very little attention and few to none elected officials who would fight for us. The most vulnerable of citizens and those working towards citizenship deserve equal representation in all levels of government. We have a unique system in New York City that has led to great wins for working families, and we have a duty to protect fusion voting, and we should expand public financing of elections statewide. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Senator Jose Gustavo Rivera. Welcome.
I'm usually a fast speaker, so this is going to go like this. Okay. Hello, Gustavo. My name is Gustavo Rivera, State Senator for the 33rd District in the Bronx. But before I was a senator, I was an advocate, much like the folks who are here. I would suggest, by the way, that because we have so many, it kind of tells you how many people are interested in this. So please have a bigger room next time. That would be good. Now we have. I believe that this is something that should be legislatively done. But here we are. We've created the commission, and now you folks are empowered. Thank you for taking on the role, and I know that you're taking it seriously, so I'm hoping that you will take everything that we're saying into account. And I will just have a couple of things that I want to talk about, and then I'll be done. First, public financing of campaigns. I believe very strongly that we need a public financing system. I have been saying this for the entire time that I've been in the Senate, even before I was in the Senate, that we need to have a system that is a public matching funds. I believe that we should have gone even a little bit farther than is proposed here, but a 6-to-1 matching funds is a good system. We need to go in that direction. I would suggest that we do that. I think that we have, the fact is there's a couple of things that are positive about it. Number one, you get people who are not able they don't have rich friends, they can't raise money. Now they will be able to raise enough money because they'll be able to get matching funds. Also, it'll take away the rumors that exist, because regardless of what my actions have been in the last 9 years in the state Senate, people can still say, oh, look at the money he's receiving. Obviously, he is making decisions based on who is giving him money. or who is giving her money, or who is giving they money. So I want to remove that completely. So having a publicly financed campaign system would also mean that we have to get more involved with the folks who are in our districts. Now, I know that I do that all the time, but some of my colleagues do not. I have a very poor district. I want to make sure that I go and ask them for $10 so I can get 60 for each dollar, for each $10 that I get. I would be remiss if I did not talk about the role of this commission, particularly as it relates to fusion voting. It is not within the purview of this commission to change fusion voting. I'll repeat that. It is not within the purview of this commission to change fusion voting. It is clearly stated in the mandate that we created in the legislature, in the statute, that the purview is to create a system of matching funds and kind of figure out what it needs to look like. So I would suggest that you stay away from that, considering, and certainly we could have somebody who is, we have a couple of elections attorney here, I'm looking at one right now, who could probably tell me much more about it than I would, who can obviously tell you more about it than I could, but the reality is that this is something that has been found constitutional, something that we have to change the Constitution to be able to shift. So finally, I will say, it is incredibly important that this is a conversation that does not happen kind of in closed doors. I would suggest again that you have a bigger room next time, that you announce it with a little bit more time. I'm glad that you folks have a website. Apparently, about an hour ago, the website went live. It'll be great if it happens more. So please make sure that we have campaign finance system. Do not end fusion voting, and God bless America.
Senator.
3, 2, 1. Thank you.
It would have been Senator. It would have been helpful if they give us the resources to do it.
Yeah. Jay Schaffner?
Absolutely.
Good afternoon. My name is Jay Schaffner. I've been a registered voter in Manhattan since 1975, currently in the 10th CD. I'm all for the Commission coming up with a reasonable plan of matching small donor contributions through public funding. This would give more power and expression to the millions in our state who are now contributing these small donor amounts to various candidates. I am totally opposed to any attempt to eliminate fusion voting, a part of New York's electoral scene since the time before the Civil War, when fusion voting advanced the cause of abolition of slavery in our country. Does the Commission want to go against more than 150 years of constitutional precedent in New York State? Every time that there has been an attempt to eliminate or restrict fusion voting, the New York State Court of Appeals has blocked those attempts and ruled that voters have a constitutional right to vote for the candidate and the party of their choice. The Commission should be addressing issues to expand democratic participation, not restrict it. To eliminate fusion voting would deny the ballot choices of more than 250,000 New York State voters in the last election who voted on the Working Families Party line for candidates to represent them in Congress and state offices. Some other states in recent years have passed restrictive voting measures, including voter ID laws. Some states have even would like to revert to the old Jim Crow poll tax laws. All these efforts weaken our democracy, suppressing the vote. Eliminating fusion voting or otherwise restricting or tampering with it would have the same effect, suppressing the vote. Every election, there are literally thousands of voters who cast their vote on the Working Families Party line, who would not do so on another party ballot line. Many of those voters would stay home rather than be forced to cast a vote on a different line. You may disagree with their logic, but that does not change the fact that taking away fusion voting will suppress the vote of thousands of voters who want to participate in our democracy, but don't want to be affiliated in any way with one of the existing major parties. To think that New York State, the state with the largest concentration of union members in the country, now wants to join efforts to restrict voting is incredible, and the Commission should reject every effort to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jesse Lehman?
Good afternoon. My name is Jesse Lehman. I'm a volunteer member and board chair of Citizen Action here in New York City. And you'll hear later from Tay Revez, who's also a volunteer member and emeritus board member of Citizen Action. Tay was actually one of our founding members here in the New York City chapter, a chapter that was built on the fight for what we then called clean elections here in New York. And it is our experience and our proud experience successfully fighting for the implementation of a small donor matching fund system here at the city level that has brought us out today to make clear the vital importance that we enact a similar system at the state level. We're here today to highlight the opportunity that you have as commissioners, this privilege to be the ones that really empower the voters of New York, to make our state government one truly of, by, and for the people, not of, by, and for the big money donors. After many years of advocacy and grassroots campaigns across New York State, this year the legislature finally acted and empowered you on the cause of fair elections. This commission was created with a clear mandate from the legislature, and if you do not propose a specific system of public financing and small donor matching funds that allow candidates to run without the influence or need for big money throughout the electoral process, then you will have failed that mandate and let us all down. In addition, if you do propose a system that weakens the power of big money donors, but simultaneously weakens the power of voters themselves to express their democratic preferences by voting for the party of their choice, you will have again failed us all. That means that you have to include in your proposals the essential elements you've heard from so many experts today, a matching fund system of at least 6-to-1 that extends throughout the primary and general elections with strong independent enforcement. And it means that you must not sully your own reputations and the legitimacy of this commission in the eyes of the public or advocates for good government by attempting to link to that good reform an attempt to end New York's multi-party system of fusion voting, which allows voters to express their preferences for candidates on the basis of their ideas and principles. In many ways, your mandate is simple. Propose small donor matching funds with high leverage. Make sure that they cover both the primaries and the general elections, and don't mess around with fusion voting. This is not rocket science. It is fair elections. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you. Can I have Assemblyman Harvey Epstein, please?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for really all of you taking time to talk about this really critical issue. And this is really a conversation about democracy and empowering people in our communities. As we know, small donors make up to less than 5% of all contributions in New York State in 2018. Larger out-of-state donors really eclipse those small donors here in New York. You know, the majority of funding came from people who gave more than $10,000 to donations. Individuals can donate up to $70,000 for statewide races. This system is totally unacceptable. We need to lower contribution levels. We need to change the status quo. We need to lower contributions for people to get a 6-to-1 match. A 6-to-1 match makes a difference in every election. We want to encourage candidates to run. We want competitive elections. Yes, we want competitive elections. We should have thresholds that are reasonable for matching funds, $5,000 for Assembly, $10,000 for Senate, $40,000 for governor's elections. Public dollars should be used in a serious and thoughtful way to ensure that are used usefully for those competitive elections. We want to drive up participation in the political process and drive up people who can give so they know their money makes a difference. That's what your job is. That's what we're here to talk about. So I know there's concerns around the opportunity for one vote on whatever you decide. I would encourage you to reconsider that. That is undemocratic. As we in the Assembly and the Senate have to deal with a thing called the big ugly at the end of each budget. The most undemocratic thing we have to deal with, because we're putting the things we love in with the things we hate, and we're told, take it or leave it. That's what you're asking the Commission to do, and we're asking you to reconsider that. Don't mesh it all together. Allow things to stand on their own merit. If something is meritorious, then vote for it. If something is not, then don't. Finally, I have a minute to talk about fusion. Fusion is something that's well heeled in our state, something we think is part of our Constitution, something courts in our land have continued to uphold, something that's fundamental to our democracy. Whether you agree or disagree with fusion voting, you can't take a step to do anything about it in this commission. I don't believe you have the authority based on what we did, and I don't believe it's the right thing for the democracy of the state of New York. So I implore you to talk about a matching system, a comprehensive matching system. Our sister state, Connecticut, has that. We should look to them. We should look to their advice. But please, if you can, stay away from fusion voting. This is not the time to mess with the system that works, and please don't do it. Thank you all for your time.
Assemblyman,
Yeah.
before you leave, we've heard this repeatedly.
Yeah.
You and your colleagues adopted a law.
Right.
It created us, and we're bound by that law.
Right.
We're bound by the mandates of the law. The law says the commission shall specifically determine and identify all details and components reasonably related to administration of a public financing program, and shall also specifically determine and identify new election laws in the following areas, and it lists among those political party qualifications, multiple party candidate nominations. Without determining what the conclusion is, we're mandated to consider those things.
So I want to refer back to my colleague, Assemblymember Carroll, who spoke earlier today, and can I respond to that?
Very briefly, yeah,
Okay.
please.
One, I think Bobby was right on. It's really important for you to focus on what's going around this country and best practices and share that information with us so we as the elected body can take that information and then vote in a public process on things that may or may not be moving
But
forward.
we have to, under the
You
mandate, we
should
have to
You
consider
should
it.
look at information and then give us feedback. On the issue of whether you can change fusion voting in the context of that, I don't think that's what it says. I think what it's trying to tell us is, hey, if we have a multi-party system, where does the money go? Does it go to the candidate on the WFP line, on the Democratic line, on the Conservative line, on the Independent line? How do you ensure a matching system works with multi-party elections?
Okay, thank you. New York City Councilman Ben Kallos, please. Oh, boy.
We passed the law.
Yep, you're right.
Thank you to this distinguished commission, fellow elected officials, and to the hundreds of people here today. I'm council member at Ben Kallos. Over 1 million people, some 80% of the voters in New York City, demanded that we get big money out of New York City politics, and we've created a constitutional, court-tested voluntary program that now offers candidates a full public match for every small dollar they raise, with 8 public taxpayer dollars up to the spending limit. In a citywide and city council special election, it has flipped how campaigns have been financed from nearly 3/4 big money to almost 2/3 small dollars, with 73% of the campaign spending coming from public dollars. I've always refused real estate money that many blame for this city's affordable housing crisis, and this law has allowed us to elect our first citywide elected official without any real estate money. This commission should adopt the New York City system in its entirety. I'll submit testimony on 18 key components and proposed improvements, many of which I've personally authored and already passed into law. It's available at benkallos.com. I'll highlight only a few of the most important. Empower small dollars over big money. Provide a full public match on every small dollar up to a spending limit. Elected officials and candidates should not spend the majority of their time soliciting a select group of millionaires and billionaires for big money. Instead, they should be in the community talking to residents who can give small dollars. Get big money out. Contribution limits need to come down from the sky-high $69,500 for governor to below the $2,800 that you can currently give to the President of the United States. Not that I would. It's time for the state to ban corporate money. The federal government has had a ban on corporate money for more than a century, New York City for more than a generation, and now 22 states. Open the ballot to more candidates. If somebody qualifies for public funds, they should get on the ballot, and we should do away with the cynical game of ballot bumping. Fusion voting must remain for races with more than one candidate, so voters can identify candidates aligned with their values, whether it's working families, women's equality, conservative, or even the rent is too damn high. Costs can be controlled and elections kept competitive by capping spending in each race and forcing candidates to return all unused funds following an election in order to eliminate war chests, kill the zombie committees, and keep the program costs well under $100 million. The time is now when the national and statewide attention is captured by the presidential election. Let's get this implemented for 2020. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Catherine Robbins. Catherine Robbins?
Good evening. Thank you so much for the opportunity to address you tonight. My name is Katie Robbins. I'm the director of the Campaign for New York Health. We are a statewide coalition advocating for the right to health care with a focus on passing and implementing legislation to create a universal publicly financed healthcare system. We support the New York Health Act in New York and federally Medicare for All. And let me tell you, a healthy democracy is good for our health. We've been speaking with New Yorkers across the state and found an alarming number of people, over 50%, delayed or skipped entirely basic health care because of cost. This number is the same whether people had insurance or not. Those who were most likely to face challenges in accessing care were low and middle income folks and people of color. Given the state of healthcare insecurity, it is not surprising that in the 2018 election, healthcare was the #1 reason people turned out to cast their ballots. Poll after poll shows how enormously popular a universal guaranteed healthcare system is among the public. Recently, 70% weighed in support of Medicare for All, with a slim majority of Republicans even. So when it comes to healthcare, it's very personal and the stakes are very high. Given all of this, the enormous popularity, the advocates who've been working on this across the state, why haven't we joined every other industrialized country with a universal healthcare system yet? And it really is a simple equation. Those who profit most from the status quo have the most money and influence on how healthcare is shaped in Albany, effectively drowning out people who need healthcare reform the most. Over $11 million was spent in the last decade to stop progress on bills like the New York Health Act. So we are standing with our allies at the Fair Elections campaign and fully support at least a 6-to-1 match on small donations from both primary and general elections, lower contribution limits, an independent enforcement unit, and we are opposed to banning fusion voting. We are counting on this commission to deliver a model for the nation, just as was promised, so we can finally join the rest of the industrialized world in being able to say that we guarantee health care as a basic right to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have John Downing, please?
Good afternoon. My name is John Downing, Brooklyn resident 1981 to 1990 and 2010 to the present. I was admitted to U.S. citizenship November 1989, in case a limey accent worries anybody here. I'm currently a retired university professor. I've come to add my voice in favor of electoral procedures reform in New York State. The practical mechanisms of elections can provide democracy's lifeblood, or they can stifle it, as the case of contemporary Hungary shows in vivid detail. Here, the Supreme Court Citizens United ruling has been a serious step backwards from democracy towards plutocracy. New York State's existing candidate contribution limits also give far too much rein to moneyed interests, considerably more than do federal limits. I am therefore speaking strongly in favor of the proposal to provide public financing to candidates at a 6-to-1 ratio to small donations. This will constitute a very inexpensive way to shift the balance of electoral power away from the very wealthy and towards the vast majority of voters and candidates for office. I'm also speaking in favor of a realistically funded Office of Public Electoral Financing to oversee the uses of public money for elections. We only need to look north to Connecticut for a working model that enjoys widespread public support. The issues at stake in the shift from plutocracy in our state are many. At the top of the list come climate change policies, housing policies, healthcare policies, public education quality, the administration of justice. All of them are far too important to be run by a few enormously wealthy folk. New York State's public deserves far better. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can I ask our New York City Speaker, Corey Johnson, to join us? Thank you.
Thank you all for being here and convening this hearing. The Public Campaign Finance Commission was created to help tackle a pressing problem, big money in politics in our state. Political campaigns that rely on large donations from individuals, from corporate donors, from lobbyists have contributed to the public distrust in government. Rebuilding that faith will take time, but creating a publicly financed campaign system is a necessary first step. We did it in New York City, and we are now excited that the state is taking a serious look at this. About a year ago, the voters weighed in and strengthened the city's Campaign Finance Act through a Charter Revision Commission, and the City Council has also passed multiple bills as well. The match is now 8-1, and we reduced the cap of individual donations for citywide races from $5,100 to $2,000 and to $2,850 to $1,000 in city council races. Clean elections should be the goal for every election, and New York City is proud to lead the way. Creating a voluntary system for candidates to receive public matching funds will, I believe, strengthen our democracy. Not only will it encourage more people to run for office, it will help take big money out of politics. For a potential run in 2021, I am not taking more than $250 a person, even though the legal limit is $2,000, and I'm not taking money from real estate developers, lobbyists, or corporate PACs, and I can only do that because of the matching system that we have here in New York City. Voters don't have to fear that pay-to-play is at work when campaign contributions are modest and the public matches end up fueling the spending that candidates can spend. And while I applaud the commission for looking at how to establish such a commission, I am concerned about eliminating fusion voting is now under the package of consideration. I believe fusion voting empowers constituents, and ending fusion voting would push people further away from the polls, I believe. Fusion voting lets New Yorkers be heard. Why would we want to take that away from New Yorkers? We shouldn't. Bundling a proposal to end fusion voting with one to create public financing, I believe, is not a way to move forward, and that is why this year we just passed a law to expand public financing in New York City elections. New Yorkers deserve the same for state elections. I am, of course, a proud progressive Democrat, but I have voted on the Working Families Party line many, many times. I've done that to try to strengthen the party sometimes. So, you know, I think that we should allow voters to have that choice. I believe the courts have weighed in on this multiple times, and I hope that even though, as you mentioned, Henry, this is part of what was talked about as part of the legislation, I believe that it should be set aside, that we should just focus on the public financing of elections and create a system similar to New York City's system and push fusion voting aside, let it remain as is. I am grateful that you all are taking up this charge, and I look forward to New York State having the best campaign finance laws in the entire country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. Daniel Altshuler.
Good afternoon, members of the Commission. My name is Daniel Altshuler. I am the Director of Civic Engagement and Research at Make the Road New York. I submit the following testimony to this Commission to express our strong support for passing a system of public financing of elections as part of as your work, and to forcefully reject efforts to end fusion voting. You all have an immense opportunity to pass a strong public financing system in the first big state in this country. It is an enormous responsibility, and we hope that you will undertake this and achieve it so that New York can move forward. I support everything, and we as an organization support everything that our allies in the Fair Elections Coalition have said. 6-to-1 match, independent enforcement, reduction in contribution limits. But I want to actually just say first that it is frankly offensive and outrageous, some of the things that have taken place in this room. And I don't know who's responsible because, frankly, it's been hard to say how this has been set up. But having a 100-person room for a public hearing in New York City on an issue of this magnitude, with people having to wait outside, is frankly unacceptable. It is also unacceptable, and I'm actually shaking for the experience of our members right now, many of whom are limited English proficient residents of New York, who are monolingual Spanish speakers, who came to the first meeting of this commission, asked for interpretation, were denied it, and then were promised it at the first and every public hearing. We then showed up today, and we were told there would be interpretation, and what there is one interpreter, a gentleman who's doing his best, but who's been provided with no equipment by the state. I don't know if it's you or the Department of State or who is running this. And so none of our members could hear the gentleman, and he, in fact, is so frustrated that he had to stop interpreting. So what that means is that New Yorkers, limited English proficient New Yorkers, who want to be heard in the democracy of New York, who want to be heard in this process, are being shut out. You will hear from two of them, and you will hear that we will have to provide the translation or interpretation ourselves, but it is unacceptable. And we ask and frankly urge and demand that this be rectified at every other proceeding of this commission. On the issues, I've said what we support in a strong public financing system, and I trust that you'll take it seriously to do it. I want to simply say, in addition, that we call on you all to reject the efforts to eliminate fusion voting through this commission. This is a shameless political ploy by Governor Cuomo, I dare say Commissioner Jacobs, and their allies. And we ask the rest of this commission to ignore this political ploy, to take this task seriously, and to focus on the task at hand, which is passing a fair and strong public financing system. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have Assemblywoman Yulene Nui?
Thank you so much for taking the time today and for the opportunity to testify before you. My name is Yulene New, and I serve as the Assembly Member for the 65th Assembly District, which covers Battery Park City, Chinatown, the Financial District, Lower East Side, and South Street Seaport. The current system of pay-to-play politics in Albany cannot continue any longer. New Yorkers everywhere have lost faith in our democracy because of the influence corporations can have on our elections and our legislative process. The only people legislators should be accountable to is our constituents and the people of New York. Public financing is a real, viable system that can fight back against corruption and send a message to our constituents that their voices matter. It empowers the communities that we should be representing in Albany. It encourages individuals to participate in elections through small-dollar donations, and it helps to level the playing field and provide people of color and women the opportunity to fairly fund campaigns and win. We need to unrig the system and restore trust in our democracy. Elect the best representative to office and not whoever happens to be the most well-connected to special interests. This all starts with passing a public financing program which must include at least a 6-to-1 match on small donations for both primary and general elections, an independent enforcement unit, and lower contribution limits. New York's system of fusion voting must also remain untouched. You've heard from my colleagues here and all of the advocates together today. Fusion voting has been part of New York's elections for centuries because it works. While fusion voting has been challenged multiple times, the State Court of Appeals has blocked all of those attempts and ruled that voters have a constitutional right to vote for the candidate and the party of their choice. Fusion voting and public financing systems are two separate issues. There is no reasonable or genuine public policy rationale for linking these two issues. There is no public demand among our constituents to ban or weaken our fusion voting system and our rights. The Commission was formed in response to our communities calling for an end to the dominance of big money and pay-to-play culture in New York State politics. Private citizens and elected officials nationwide alike are fighting for the continued implementation of fusion voting. Banning fusion is contrary to the Commission's goal, which is to strengthen and expand our democracy by establishing a system of low-dollar public financing of elections and reducing the power of big money in politics. In fact, fusion voting works hand in hand with democracy. Not everyone's beliefs and priorities fit neatly into any party box, Democratic or Republican. Citizens who support a third party should still be able to vote for who they think best represents them in any given election. Fusion voting ensures that our voters always have a voice in our elections and an impactful vote. New Yorkers should have the best system for choosing who represents them, and the best system includes fusion voting and a strong public financing system. I urge the Commission to implement a strong public financing system and leave fusion voting untouched. These two important political systems work together to amplify the voices of everyday New Yorkers in our political process. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman New. Blair Horner.
Good afternoon. My name is Blair Horner. I'm Executive Director of NYPIRG, New York Public Interest Research Group, a nonpartisan, not-for-profit research and advocacy organization. We appreciate the opportunity to testify on the need to overhaul New York's campaign finance law and in support of an establishment of a voluntary system of public financing that relies on small donors. I'll summarize NYPIRG's written comments. All New Yorkers should appreciate the work that you have to do. There's a lot of work, and without any compensation. What New Yorkers cannot know is that the Commission may have been set up. As you know, in the final budget agreement, the governor and the legislative majorities agreed to create the Commission. It did so on March 31st. Under the law, the Commission must establish, quote, a system of voluntary public financing for statewide and state legislative public offices by December 1st. That deadline gave the Commission a mere 8 months to meet its statutory mandate. 8 months to create an overhaul of the state's campaign financing system is a daunting task. For 3 full months, the governor and the legislative leaders dithered over appointments to the Commission, finally announcing their picks in early July. Now it's early September, with only 80 days until your deadline. As far as I can see, you have few resources. You have what can only be charitably described as an unimaginably tight timetable to figure out the first-in-a-generation overhaul of the state's campaign finance system. A reasonable person reviewing the situation would have to wonder if you've all been set up to meet an impossible goal. Fortunately, however, in this case, there is a roadmap for action that has been clearly written and a blueprint for action that has been placed for decades with time-tested successes. The roadmap is provided by the work of 2 Moreland commissions, in particular the work of the Moreland Commission of the 1980s, the FERA Commission, and the blueprint is the New York City campaign financing system. NYPIRG urges that you follow that roadmap and adopt that blueprint, that you announce today that you will focus future hearings on how best to scale that up to a statewide system. In addition, we urge the Commission not get distracted by other unrelated election law issues, particularly fusion voting. As you know, on the Senate floor, the Senate Elections Committee chair was asked about this question specifically and said that it was narrowly focused on the statute that was needed to implement a public financing system. You simply don't have the time or the resources to do anything more than you're required to do under the law. The New York City system may need some tweaks. We urge you to focus the hearings that come up on what is necessary to make that system work statewide. The clock is ticking. The Commission has a lot of work to do. Attack your responsibilities by using that blueprint and roadmap. Thank you.
Thank you. Therese Rivez, if I said that right, I hope.
Hi, I'm Tay Rivez.
Tay?
Tay for short.
Okay.
I am a member of Citizen Action. I am a member of the Brennan Center's New York Lead, which is a business, academic, and philanthropic committee. I'm also part of the Fair Election Commission, and I am a member of the New York County Democratic Commission. I'm also part of the small donor class and a small business owner. I've been working on this issue for 25 years. It is a seminal issue for our democracy. I've watched for decades as we've been working for this, where dark money, particularly following Citizens United, has flooded our system and is destroying our democracy and weakening our government. You, 10 commissioners, have a historic opportunity to make things right. You have a historic opportunity to take New York from 41st in the nation, or one of the last countries in terms of small donation, to one of the first. You can set the model for the nation if you do this right. Your time is very short. There are models. There is the Brennan Center, 6 critical building blocks. The 6-to-1 match, the match in New York has given us the most responsive, most knowledgeable, most representative city council I've seen in politics since I started working in this when I was 14. It's a long time ago. Cap the limits, fund it adequately so candidates can be competitive, so they can opt into the system without worrying about the independent PACs. There are 6 points. I'm going to add 2 more that are out of it. We've talked about a fair, independent board or office to monitor that. They need to be resourced adequately. They also should have a mandate to work with candidates to help them follow and do this ethically. To that end, they should be mandated to set up rules that are clear, easy to follow, so that candidates don't inadvertently transgress the rules. I've talked with so many treasurers and candidates who have tried to follow the rules and run afoul of them, not because they want to, but because the rules can be complicated. So otherwise I have to spend a lot of money, and it's our money, our taxpayer money, on accountancies. You know, why spend it there? A vigorous, healthy, small donor matching system of public finance is our best guarantee of democracy and our best guarantee of a healthy New York State. On the fusion voting, I'm just going to say one thing. There are a lot of points, and I agree with them, but this is a poison pill to kill the rest of your hard work. And I should remind you that those of you who are with the major parties, and I'm a lifelong Democrat, that it is some of the minority parties that have given major party candidates the edge to win. Thank you, and I actually have the more detailed.
Thank you.
What I sent for you.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. State Senator Jessica Ramos. Thank you. Okay. In the interim, okay.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for hearing me. I have to say, I saw almost every white male politician come up and testify, because it seems you're not going by any sort of order, and yet I was sitting there for over an hour waiting to testify. And then upon that hearing that most of my constituents who make the road in New York have no translation. So I don't understand how it is that this hearing is being called upon and how it's being carried out. But I do urge you as a commission to actually do your job and be fair to every single person who's here to testify. Public financing of elections is one of the only ways that we can amplify the voices of everyday New Yorkers, particularly women, people of color, and working class families, those who've been traditionally marginalized from government and our civil society. This is why I voted for the creation of your commission in the first place. As the state senator for the most diverse population in the world, establishing an effective and seamless transition to integrate public financing for elections in New York State is critical. To tackle the crises we face in housing, living wage jobs, criminal justice reform, guaranteed health care, and more, we must fix our campaign finance system, which favors the wealthy over everyday working New Yorkers. This commission was not created with the objective of examining fusion voting. As the Brennan Center made clear in March, there is no policy connection between public financing and fusion voting, and certainly no conflict between the two. In fact, both Connecticut and New York City have strong systems and fusion voting. Not everyone fits neatly into the Democratic or Republican Party box, nor should they. Citizens who support a third party still deserve the right to participate in politics in a meaningful and effective way. Fusion allows third-party members and supporters to vote without spoiling or wasting their vote on a candidate with no chance of actually winning. Under the state's fusion voting system, voters can vote for a candidate who can actually win, but also vote for that candidate on a party line whose values they want to support. New York is now moving forward because third parties can have a voice. They have a voice because of fusion voting. You've been charged with growing our democracy, and that means increasing choice. Create a public financing system that works and leave fusion voting alone. The goal of this commission is to strengthen and expand our democracy by establishing a system of low-dollar public financing of elections and reduce the power of big money in politics. The goal of this commission should not be to undermine or end New York's fusion voting system. Doing so would be a huge mistake and a huge misstep in the opposite direction that would only serve to weaken our democracy. I will personally be watching to see how these hearings continue to unfold. Thank you.
Sandra Radiff. We're doing the best we can. I have a couple of
Hi, my name is Sandra Radoff, and I want to thank you for the time to testify today. I'm a New York State resident, a small business owner, a mother, a wife, and a political activist who is very concerned about the state of our democracy. Corruption is legal in America. This is according to a major study done spanning 20 years of research by two Princeton University political scientists who posed the basic question, does the US government represent the people? They concluded in this study that, I quote, the preferences of the average American appear to have only a minuscule, near zero impact on public policy. The same research shows that the preferences of the elite, special interests, and big money are highly correlated with what laws are passed and what public policies are enacted. This country is controlled by a small group of rich, well-connected, politically powerful people and well-placed individuals in institutions like banking, real estate, big pharma, oil and gas, and the military. This pattern repeats in New York State. We know, for example, that in the 2015 election cycle, the real estate industry in New York contributed 10 times as much to state politicians as individual small donors did. There are many other examples one could cite. These interests don't give large sums of money without expecting something in return. Estimates at the national level, which examined contributions and lobbying expenditures over a 5-year period by just the top 200 companies, indicated that a $5.8 billion spent yielded these same companies $4.4 trillion in taxpayer support. That's trillion with a T. That's close to $800 in givebacks for each dollar contributed. Quite a return on investment at the people's expense. Campaign finance reform is not a small issue. This is about our democracy. It's not that our opinions about the environment, healthcare, or guns don't matter. They do. It's just that they are irrelevant if we don't live in a democracy. When the rich and powerful make the bulk of campaign contributions, public opinion doesn't matter. There's only one issue that matters: who controls our politicians? According to the 2013 Moreland Commission, which investigated public corruption in New York State, quote, Albany has fostered a pay-to-play political culture that is greased by a campaign finance system in which large donors set the legislative agenda. While we know from this past election that some New York State politicians voluntarily refused big money contributions, a huge imbalance between the rich and powerful and the people remains. It's time we make a change that is codified into solid public policy. We need at least 6-to-1 small donor matching so the voice of the people will get through in New York State. Other states will be watching what New York does. Let's set an example for the rest of the country and strengthen our democracy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Assemblywoman Diana Richardson.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Assemblywoman Diana Richardson. I proudly represent the 43rd Assembly District in Central Brooklyn. That's Crown Heights, Prospect, Lefferts Gardens, and East Flatbush. I didn't really write anything today because I think I do best when I speak from my heart. I took a few notes, though. I want you to take a look at me, and I want you to hear who I am. I am the daughter of immigrants. My mother worked for the Board of Ed. My father was a truck driver. As you can see, my voice is strong. I've always had a whole lot to say. I've always been caring for people. I've never thought that I would ever be an elected official. I never thought that I could ever go into politics. But there was a few people who saw just, you know, my black girl magic and believed in me and who poured into me, and so I'm here today. But when I got to the New York State Legislature, my heart was severely broken. I came there ready to roll up my sleeves, and anyone would tell you I'm severely action-oriented. As a matter of fact, I love my residents of my district so much, I think it probably would be the death of me. But when I got into the room to get busy, and I sat in the room with my colleagues, I was shocked to see the inaction of those who elected to be in the same room as me. Many people who were sitting in the room with me saying one thing, but then they would go out onto the floor and do something totally different. I saw so many conversations where it was severely politicized. We weren't passing legislation or having the conversation about the right thing to do for everyday average New Yorkers. We were thinking about how it would affect us politically. I'm here to tell you that if anyone who is elected stands before you and tells you that the amount of money they receive or who they receive money from in a campaign contribution does not sway or dissuade them to speak up or to vote in a different way, they're wrong. Let me give you a hypothetical situation. My girl, someone gives you $4 a month. My man, somebody gives you $4,000 a month. Your phone rings at the same time. Who call is it that you take? The people who I represent in the 43rd Assembly District, our average AMI is only $40,000, $45,000. The people of the community that I represent, they are not affluent New Yorkers. They are the working poor. They can't afford to give me $4,000 max checks, but they can give me $4. And I need that their $4 can be matched so that they can support me. I am one of the elected officials in the state of New York who has refused campaign contributions from the real estate industry and big special interests from day one. As a matter of fact, we were the trendsetters of that. And let me just say this, and I gotta hurry up with this because I don't want to overstep my time. I love Governor Cuomo. He's such a charismatic man, but we all know he has a vendetta against the Working Families Party. We all know it. We all know it. Please do not allow this commission to be used to carry out somebody's ill will just because they want to control the way democracy works in New York State. God bless you, and I count on you to do the right thing.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. I have Richard Thomas is the former mayor of Mount Vernon. Not here? Oh, here. There you go. Sorry. That's the one sheet. He just got another one. Another one?
Good afternoon.
Hi, John. Hi, good afternoon.
How you doing? First, in honor of 9/11, want to make sure that we pay respect to those that lost their lives in advance of tomorrow. Police, the firefighters, to make sure we all take a moment tomorrow to reflect on that. My name is Rich Thomas, former mayor of Mount Vernon, New York. And in 2015, I was 32. I was finishing my executive MBA at Stern, and my wife was pregnant with our second child. In the midst of all this, I decided to leave my job and pursue my dream and run for mayor of Mount Vernon, my hometown. Everyone with the experience was warned to stay away, and they stayed away from our grassroots efforts to take our city back. So my campaign staff was small, consisting of family, friends, and my treasurer happened to be my grandmother's friend who knew bookkeeping. Unfortunately, at the same time, she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and died during the election. So, as you can imagine, naturally common mistakes were made, and common sense solutions ought to be available to correct some of these issues that arose. But a parking ticket became a death sentence for me because I was unable to make the said changes according to the State Board of Elections guidelines and process. So what happened to me is more of a story about power, not just money. It's about power. And what happened to me at the hands of the State Attorney General's office is more dangerous than Russia and Facebook. If mine were a normal case, the process outlined by the State Board of Elections would have been followed. There would have been a back and forth between my attorneys and the SBOE. We would have resolved these issues. But instead, the whole process was co-opted. Eric Schneiderman, at the time, someone's urging, needed to create a criminal case against me to leverage and force me out of office. And that is why the SBOE was kept in the dark the entire time. I thought I would naturally have an ally in the Attorney General's office and the State Comptroller's office, but that was naive. Rather than investigating matters involving illegal dumping at Memorial Field, our public park, or looking into missing millions of dollars that were in the city, my team confirmed that the AG never got a referral from the SBOE. And when we brought it to a Manhattan judge who agreed with us, it was too late to deal with the issue, because by that time, they indicted me before I could even walk into the grand jury room. All because I didn't want to toe the political line. I believe in what these people are talking about, and I hope you do too. While my time is up, my comments are here for the record, and I just hope that you offer clarification to the rules, the state rules, to allow ordinary people to run for office, and you close that trap door so that people like me that want to make a difference don't get beat up by the AG and can't defend myself the same way de Blasio did and Eric Schneiderman did at your expense. I look forward to having a dialogue with you in the future about this important issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Barry McCoy?
My name is Barry McCoy. I'm a member of the State Committee of the Democratic Party since 1972, and I've authored and spoken against fusion voting many times in the State Committee. I would like to second the comments made by the representative of Steve Bellone, the county executive from Suffolk. I have the feeling that what I hear in this room has nothing to do with the way fusion voting actually works, at least in my county. There was a discussion here about, oh, it gives the voters more choice, more candidates. What actually happens out in Suffolk County is that it decreases voters' choices, it gives you much less choice. Why does that happen? Because in order to get on the ballot of one of these minor parties, you have to have the blessing of the chairman of the minor party. That's one person. So the chairman of the Independence Party, the chairman of the Conservative Party, has vast amounts of power to decide who gets to be on what ballot, and that's a virtually unchallenged power. So the whole concept of one man, one vote is seriously compromised in the way fusion voting actually works out in a county where there's competitive elections between Republicans and Democrats. I'll give one example. This was several years ago. We had the Democratic Party put up a candidate for town clerk in my county, in my town. We circulated petitions. We got, we need about 1,500 names on the petitions. We got it all qualified. And then the chairman of the Independence Party decided that he wanted to have his candidate to run basically unopposed. The candidate had the endorsement of the Republican Party. He wanted to be sure that there was no serious competition from the Democratic Party. So he told the candidate that unless the candidate declined the nomination, he would withdraw all of the cross endorsements that he was planning on making for the county legislature. This is a serious problem. If you lose all of the endorsements for county legislatures, the pressure brought on our candidate was tremendous. She eventually dropped out. So the net result of the fusion voting was to have less choice rather than more choice. This happens at least outside of the city of New York. I represent to you this happens in practically every county in the state of New York. Fusion voting should be eliminated. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Terry Hagedorn?
Hi.
Hi, Terry.
Thank you for holding this hearing and the opportunity to testify. My name is Terry Hagedorn, and I'm a volunteer member of the New York chapter of Represent Us, which is a national anti-corruption organization. A critical component of our efforts is campaign finance reform, and we recently advocated for an increase to the public match here in New York, which of course is a national model. At the state level, we're in a decidedly different place. We've already quoted this 100 individual donors contributing as much as 137,000 donors combined, which is crazy. We already know that New York tops the list of states with corrupt officials, with 30 cases against public servants filed over a 10-year period. The lax campaign finance laws that we have at the state level enable wealthy donors to fundraise during budget season, at the same time that many of these donors have business before the state government. New York has the highest contribution limits of any state that has limits, as we were talking about, with $70,000 enabled to go to candidates for governor. So it's not surprising that Governor Cuomo's campaign received 99% of its donations from donors of $1,000 or more. So this system is just a threat to our democracy, and one of the main reasons that I decided to leave the advertising industry and begin using my powers for good to campaign for meaningful change in our government. And the opportunity before your commission is what many volunteers like myself have been working on for many years. New York has the ability to enact the same matching program that has been successfully operating in New York City for 30 years, with documented benefits to the city, to candidates, and to democracy. The city benefits by empowering New Yorkers in every neighborhood to make their voices heard. And according to a recent study by the CUNY Graduate Center, city voters who contributed to a political campaign are 3 times more likely to vote in that election. Candidates benefit because making those funds easier to access enables ordinary citizens of diverse backgrounds to enter public life, and you've been hearing from them tonight. And finally, democracy benefits because the program amplifies the voices of ordinary voters and helps to ensure politicians are accountable to the people that they serve. In fact, if we had applied New York City's matching system to the state elections in 2018, the Campaign Finance Institute estimates that small donors would have jumped from 5 to as much as 32% of funding for assembly candidates, and from 5% to 24% to Senate candidates. They also predict that as many as 3 times more contributors would donate in state elections moving forward due to the weight of those small donations. And finally, Campaign Finance Institute estimates that the cost for the public match would be less than 1 penny per day for New Yorkers statewide, which obviously is a small price to pay for our democracy. Thank you for the chance to speak.
Thank you very much. Bienvenido Polanco. What's his name? What's your name? Oops. What's his name? What's it?
Buenas tardes, comisión. Soy Bienvenido Polanco, miembro de Se Hace Camino Nueva York. Como padre de familia e inquilino, quiero que esta comisión sepa que una gran parte de la solución a los problemas que enfrentamos en este estado es parar elecciones justas. Yo tengo 2 hijos que estudian en las escuelas públicas que nunca tienen los recursos que necesitan, y hemos vivido difícil que encontrar una vivienda asequible en New York. Los retos que enfrentamos se basan en el control que han tenido los ricos y grandes corporaciones sobre la democracia en nuestro estado. Hoy exigimos una reforma integral del sistema de financiamiento de las elecciones en este estado para lograr un gobierno estatal que escuche y responda a las voces de nuestra comunidad. En el tema de educación, hemos visto cómo la gente de los fondos buitres dona millones para que los políticos le den prioridad a las escuelas charter y descuiden las escuelas públicas. Lo mismo vemos como la gente de bienes raíces que ha donado millones para poder seguir desalojando a nuestras comunidades. Esto desilusiona a la gente de nuestra comunidad. Vemos gente salir a votar, menos gente corre como candidato porque no tienen acceso a la gente adinerada. Queremos una reforma democrática que responde a los valores de nuestra comunidad. Queremos un sistema que reduzca el límite de las grandes contribuciones políticas y que incluya financiamiento público de elecciones, donde el Estado pone de contraparte 6 veces las donaciones pequeñas de nuestras comunidades. Y exigimos que no toquen el sistema de fusión electoral. Los neoyorquinos queremos más opciones, no menos en nuestra democracia. Y esta comisión debe mantenerse enfocada en crear un sistema de financiamiento público, nada más y nada menos. Este es el momento para alzar la voz del pueblo y reducir la influencia de las corporaciones. Espero que lo hagan una realidad. Gracias.
I'll quickly interpret for bienvenido.
I'm sorry, excuse me, before you interpret. Primeramente, le quiero decir gracias por decirlo y decirlo en su lenguaje. Sí entendimos qué fue lo que usted dijo ahora. Como parte del comité, vamos a averiguar qué fue lo que pasó con la traducción de afuera, pero muchísimas gracias por dar su opinión, aunque ahora mismo el señor atrás de usted va a traducir exactamente qué es lo que dijo, pero muchísimas gracias.
Here we go,
I'll repeat it
Elzora.
right after.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon, members of the Commission. I am Bienvenido Polanco, a member of Make the Road New York. As a parent and tenant, I want this commission to know that a large part of the solution to the problems in this state is to adopt fair elections. I have 2 children who study in public schools that never have the resources they need, and we know firsthand how difficult it is to find affordable housing in New York. The challenges we face are rooted in the control that ultra-wealthy people and large corporations have had over democracy in our state. Today, we demand a comprehensive reform of the election financing system in this state to achieve a state government that listens and responds to the voices of our community. On the issue of education, we have seen how hedge fund boosters donate millions so that politicians give priority to charter schools and neglect public schools. We see the same thing with real estate barons who have donated millions to win policies that allow them to continue displacing our communities. This constant dynamic has disillusioned people in our community. Fewer people go out to vote, and fewer people run as candidates because they don't have access to wealthy donors. We want true democratic reform that represents the values of our community. We want a system that reduces the limit for large political contributions and that includes a robust public financing system, where the state puts forward a 6-to-1 match to small donations from our communities. And we call on you not to touch the fusion voting system. New Yorkers want more options, not fewer options, in our democracy. And this commission must remain focused on creating a public financing system. Nothing more and nothing less. This is the time to raise the voice of the people and reduce the influence of the wealthy and big corporations. I hope you make this a reality. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I will repeat what I said to him. I said, thank you for sharing with us and sharing in his language. It's fine, he can walk. And for sharing in his language his exact opinion that he has regarding this, and for coming before the commission, whether or not he had a provided interpreter by us, and thank you for sharing again.
Thank you. Sean Abreu. Okay. Elzora Cleveland.
Thank you for that translation. I appreciate it. I want to be fully engaged in the process. My name is Elzora Cleveland. I live and vote in Manhattan. I had a lot to say about public financing of elections and fusion voting, but I don't think they're worth saying, because as a public member, I don't feel that Commissioner Jacobs will allow this commission to operate as it should. And I know that's a harsh thing to say, I don't know you. But the behavior at the first meeting of the commission does not inspire confidence. He introduced a resolution that was a little bizarre and almost unnecessary. And it seems like he did so without giving his colleagues, which would be all of you equally, an advance notice about what he was intending to do, with the possible exception of Commissioner Berger, possibly his friend. What kind of organization or body runs like that? As a training parliamentarian, people in well-run organizations prepare agendas and materials and present resolutions, especially to the appointed body, to prepare properly for thoughtful decision and meaningful debate, right? Instead, Commissioner Jacobs rammed it through and came out with this wonderful proposal that you should just take action without thought. Anyway, we have been working for 7 years for a good public financing bill. Senator Stuart Cousins, now Majority Leader Stuart Cousins, was our champion for years and was the lead sponsor of the fair elections legislation. Now we are at that moment of truth. Woo, we're excited. And it feels like the governor and Commissioner Jacobs have hijacked the commission and want to use it to do away with fusion voting? My right? My candidate, my party line, my choice. My right? Restore trust in our democracy and focus on public financing of elections. People are not stupid. We're quite intelligent in ways that you would not believe. I implore the members, I implore you to, the members of the commission, to not allow yourselves to be used by the governor or Commissioner Jacobs and his partner to settle a score with the Working Families Party. If the fusion law is not perfect, let the legislation fix it. You were appointed, not elected. Your job is to figure out the details of public financing system, not write a law that undermines the right of people. I urge you, restore trust in democracy and focus your efforts on public financing of elections.
Thank you. Ms. Cleveland, if I might, just the one thing that I would agree with in the beginning is that you do not know me.
And you are right.
Okay. Thank you. Bertha Lewis? I'll take a break right after this.
Good evening, and thank you to the commissioners. My name is Bertha Lewis. Let me start out by introducing myself through my voter profile. I'm a senior, and we all know seniors are active voters. I'm also the IT demographic, a black woman. And we also know that we vote when our vote is not blocked. I'm also a founding member of the Working Families Party and I'm a registered WFP voter, which is why I'm testifying. This is my party. This is the line I vote on, and I've worked hard to get WFP a ballot space. Over the years, I've collected tens of thousands of signatures, and it is a sign of the support that we gather when we made 50,000 votes to get the ballot line on the first try. And we've maintained that status, Mr. Jacobs and Mr. Bergers, ever since. Now we face a situation in which the members of this commission are being asked to not only determine how public financing will be implemented, but also have been thrown a totally bogus notion that you have to decide on fusion as opposed to discussing multiple parties. This is not what your commission charge is, and yes, we can read the law too, Mr. Berger. It's not your charge because the issues are totally unrelated. You can and must implement a public financing system without dealing with getting rid of fusion. To do away with fusion voting is to thumb your nose at democracy, and I know this as a voter and as the specific kind of voter that I am. Having multiple lines helps us hold candidates accountable, which may be the reason for this discussion in the first place. We can run people on multiple lines as well as on our own line. My understanding is there's only one party that says that they would be very fine if we got rid of fusion. Only the Green Party, which never uses fusion, is opposed to it. Given the Greens' cynical position, whatever they say in this debate should be totally disregarded. It would not look good if you fail to recognize that the constitutional right of fusion in our state constitution has been upheld numerous times over the last 100 years. But more importantly, this has nothing to do with whether or not we have real democracy. Putnam County and Suffolk County, I feel sorry for you, but let us not take it out on fusion voting. I know that this commission will do the right thing, not be distracted, and not be confused. I know you will make sure public financing is institution and fusion voting is preserved as it is in our state constitution.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. I would ask the commission if we could take a 5-minute break. It's been requested, and then we're going to move on, so we'll take a 5-minute break. Okay? Thanks.